Praise the higher family. He's the most high, holy and eternal, King of all kings, the only true wise and living God, the Almighty. Well, hello, family. So coming on today, and it's been quite a time just getting online. So I've had some issues with my technology, and my laptop has now refused to even start. So a case of the enemy sinking to new lows, basically. So I've not been able to post for the last couple of days as I've not had access to my laptop due to, for some reason, it breaking. So I left it on, I think, overnight. I forgot to actually power it down and switch it off, which really shouldn't be a problem. But it seemed to get super hot. And then the actual fan on it, if you'll notice the last couple of videos I posted, you can actually hear the sound of the whirring of the fan in the background. As a result of my having left it on overnight. I mean, I don't do it commonly, just as a one-off. But it seemed to anyway, my laptop didn't like it, so now it's refusing to start completely. So now I'm left with no laptop and trying to now record on my phone. So hence my not having posted recently, and at such a time as this as well. So I know many of you are aware of the current nature of the time we're currently in. Really just at the point of actually entering into a major spiritual shift, if you will, in the earth, and a time of great acceleration also. So I was keen to be seen to be at my post and also working at this time, and also now stepping more formally into the role that Yahuwah is actually calling me now to step into. So I've now come on really a number of times and spoken in a little bit, in part, about my experiences and about what has been going on. And I'm quite pleased to see, even looking around and talking to people and even looking at various things on social media, to see that many people are quite switched on and are actually aware of what has been unfolding. We are, as we can see, in a time of major exposure. Yahuwah is bringing a number of things that have been going on spiritually in the background around us, or for generations, we now to the light. And you'll be aware that I have been the target of Destiny Swap campaigns as well. And I've talked in part a little bit about this. And even seeing that even still now, despite Yahuwah intervening and doing many great things, there is still a person trying to parade and actually trying to come out in my identity. So there are still being challenges really in this regard, and I'm still Yahuwah is giving victory, because ultimately he will be victorious. It's he who has actually called me to ministry and to come out at this time, and so I'm really just standing up in obedience to that, to make a formal declaration of my intention to step into legitimate ministry and role that he now has called me to do, because we are at a very pivotal time really in the evolution of the earth, really, and in the unfolding of many things that now need to be brought to pass. And these things cannot be done by anyone else, and they cannot be done certainly by someone rooted in darkness. And the person seeking to operate in my identity is operating in the kingdom of darkness. So anyway, in the fullness of time, I will expound more fully on these things. But Yahuwah really has brought judgment, or is bringing judgment increasingly on this whole system, and really has been instructing them to desist in a number of things that they are doing, and they are trying to show defiance, which we all know how that's going to end. So as we can see, and I have spoken in quite detail, really, in a number of Sabbath sessions we've done to really show and give context and understanding to the nature of the current environment, global world order, if you want to call it, that we currently live in. And we are all aware, we have to look really at many of the things actually going on within the church and the state of the church. And I don't say that to be pointing a finger, But when we see the actual, well, how the church was actually in the actual Bible, in the books of Acts, the times of Acts, where we are today, we can see that certainly there is, well, a gap, if you will. So something isn't really correctly aligned, and we are being told constantly by Yahuwah to come out and to be separate unto him. So we have really been examining this question and looking in quite detail into this question. Now, I have really explained really the nature of the, I call it the Babylonian system, the Babylonian church, because essentially she is rooted and was initially established in this actual specific beast system, essentially. And from her foundations and inception under her seventh king, who would have been Constantine, essentially, who remodeled this whole overall system into leading through the softer power of the church, essentially, of which all the proliferation of churches that we currently see is basically her outworking. So currently we have about, I think I did a Google search recently and found about 47,000 different denominations of Protestant church in the earth currently, and growing. So we see this proliferation really in the actual nature of the Yahuwah's house. At least under Israel and antiquity, she managed to keep it under one denomination, essentially, but we have this proliferation. Nevertheless, in our current context, and there was some moves, I believe, by the Vatican to actually repatriate those denominations into a singular church once again. Although I'm not, I don't know whether those other churches got the memo and realized that there was an attempt to do that, but anyway, that's by the by. But I say that to really say that one of her core outwork is through this tabernacle connectional system. And this is a system that Yahuwah is very displeased with and is really bringing judgment to at this time. And it's been a system which I have also myself been significantly targeted, well, almost from birth, essentially. So what I will say is that in the whole process and unfolding of these agendas, which to me are just, I would denounce them as being total criminal undertakings, because I've been subject to harassment, conspiracy, defamation, and attempts to smear my reputation. So smear campaigns, humiliation rituals as well is a common practice, stalking, and even extortion in the background, and even theft as well. But not theft necessarily in the actual sense which you might typically expect theft. This is now spiritual theft as well. So we have come to understand that she is an entity that has, besides merchandising in legitimate commodity trades, as expanded in Revelations 18, I believe it's verses 12 to 13, which lists essentially a series of luxury items in which she does commoditize and trade. So she is a global trading entity. And we know that because the world economy is based on trade. So that's what that actually is alluding to in Revelations 18. But there lists two other unsalubrious trades, one in the slaves of men, the slaves, of course, being the slaves of our people, Yasharel. It's not really talked about, it's a hush-hush trade, and many of us would possibly even want to deny that this is a legitimate trade. But I've proven, given actual statute and verse, to show you that the actual laws that mandate that our people, Yasharites, are still in captivity, are still on the legal statute books globally, and were invoked as recently as 2005 to successfully defend a case. So we have actually seen that. Besides that, she does also operate separate trade in soul trade, soulical trade. This is people actually selling their souls to the kingdom of darkness to gain advantage, whether political, financial, social advantage. And we've looked into this to explain how displeasing this is to Yahuwah, because the God who created all things freely would freely give to anyone riches, success, if they'd ask. Granted, Yahuwah does have a process to actually granting gifts to people, And his reason, really, in a sense, is more for the preservation of the people he's going to give the gifts to, because he knows the actual influence power can corrupt. As I believe someone once said, and total power corrupts totally or completely. So to prevent someone actually being spiritually destroyed by the gift, Yahuwah would actually require a person to actually undergo a process of refinement before they are then deemed able to actually handle that gift responsibly and not be spiritually destroyed. But others not wanting to go through that process, taking shortcuts, they go to the kingdom of darkness. But Satan has no gifts at all to give to anyone. So where does he get the gifts or the advantages he gives to others? Well, he steals them from those who possess spiritual gifts. So hence we see the actual targeting mechanism of this whole entity and why we do then also, besides the actual solical trade we see, have another kind of backroom trade in the gifts, attributes, talents of men, of people. Of course, in most cases, it's Yahuwah's people who are gifted or who possess these gifts. So I explained how there's really a whole trade in actual star hunting, if you will. I've explained that how that works. We did a 3-part teaching on that called the actual, I think, Star Trade in Destiny. I believe that series is called. It's posted on this channel also. So they actually do hunt for people who they believe have gifts, and normally try to break the individuals. That's the reason they try to break individuals, because they want to fragment the actual spirit of that person to then access the gifts within that person. So hence you see the reason for the nature of the spiritual attacks that they have actually been directing. They do direct to individuals. So this really has been an entity that has been, well, destroying people for generations in many cases. And Yahuwah really has brought judgment really against it. He's both verified it, found it wanting. The writing is well past on the wall, essentially. And essentially is removing it. So this is really making way for a new order of things to now come about. And the order that is coming about cannot be rooted in darkness. It cannot. So anyone trying to steal an identity to take that forward was going to very quickly find themselves in some pretty hot water, very, very quickly. So as I will say, there is someone else who is trying to muscle in, and they're doing some quite, things that are going to bring them under serious judgment of God, because they're doing some things that are even by evil standards are pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Are pretty low. Trying to actually astral project into someone's actual soul and wear kind of attributes of that person, almost like a garment, like a costume. So studying someone's mannerisms, behavior, responses, and even psyche, because they even do divination on quite an extensive scale as well to try to acquire a map or an understanding of that person's vulnerabilities and weaknesses. And then they hedge attacks really on that sort of basis. So this is really spoken of by the prophet Nahum. If you recall, he talks of this mystery Babylon, this harlot, who sells nations through her whoredoms and families through her witchcrafts. So this is essentially also what he's actually speaking of there. So as I say, this is a situation that Yahuwah is intervening quite severely in, and is the reason why we see, the sorts of things we see Yahuwah say about Edom specifically. Because as I've explained, of all the nations post the judgment, Edom is one of the few nations that doesn't return, meaning that she's judged totally and just totally removed. So explain that even Sodom returns. to her lot and heritage. Even Egypt also is returned. But Edom doesn't return. And the reason she doesn't is because of many of these things that she's actually doing. So as I say, many of these activities do result in criminal activities, both spiritually criminal and even criminal in law. But we see, as we've come to actually understand, we did an actual podcast for our sister channel, Israel Diaspora Report, called The Mixture from Seir, which was an Old Testament name for Edom, to see really how the legal system also essentially is actually the root or rooted into this overall system also. So there's also an agenda to control justice also, and root that very favorably on the side of their agendas. And you could actually speak about a time coming where people will actually call good evil and evil good, and actually legislate that into the overall jurisdiction of the way they operate. That very much is the case of that overall entity, essentially. So I personally have experienced psychological psyop, psychological attacks and campaigns, as well as they do very much seek to invade your spiritual, psychological space. Yeah. So it's a situation that Yahuwah is aware of, it has dismantled, has judged, and has called time against. And really, the attempts of anything now to resist are futile because they're no longer there. They have been already, it's already past tense, it's already been removed. But what next, really? And what essentially is their point? Because as we can see, we all have sensed the actual ground shifting beneath our feet. So as we're coming very, very much into a new era and a new way of moving forward, a new way of doing things. And even a way of remembering some of the things that we've lost. Because a lot of very important things, even very small things, in the overall race to, I can only say, get to the bottom, because that's what it has been in many, many cases, with a gloss polish. But many important things have been lost really along the way. And one of the things Yahuwah is very, very keen to, to remind people really is that, well, how much he loves them, essentially. And that he has a plan and a purpose for each and every one of us. That many are forsaking to try to actually take on the plans and purposes of other people, which are not at all their purpose, and ultimately won't bring them the happiness or the joy that they seek, because they're not their own ultimate purpose. So Yahuwah does have a design, a purpose, a destiny for each person who is in the earth. I wouldn't say you can't find it if you don't come to Yahuwah, but you probably can get to a better, a more fundamental and good understanding of it if you take that purpose to the Creator, or the one who made you, but you seek his insight and his guidance in really trying to uncover his design for your soul. And so increasing as a channel, we're going to move really onto looking at some of these questions. And also in addressing also some of the issues as well, and the ongoing, you call it injustices really around a number of these things that have impacted our people specifically. And these were things I was actually in the process of working on and have been trying to actually bring forth around all the difficulties I've been having logistically as well with my technology. But nevertheless. So as I say, I'm coming now more out into the forefront now to take up my mantle and to move this forward as well. I want to thank all those of you who have been praying for me. I'm aware there are a great constituency of people who do support, have been praying in the background which I am extremely grateful. So as I say, we are now coming into a new order of things and into a new, as I say, I wouldn't call it an era, because it really is a whole new world, essentially, because of the nature of the actual shift we have now come through. And one of the actual things that is required at this time is ascension. It's no longer a time where we can continue really to proceed in the way that we have always traditionally gone. It's a new order of things that does require a whole new order of response to meet it. So Yahuwah is laying down very firmly a gauntlet around a number of these things. And is also keen to pour out revelation and understanding and more of his spirit as well, also at this time. And so it's quite common and normal to see these sorts of instabilities at times of onset of spiritual revival as well, which is now where we are now poised. So it's a time that does require some introspection. Well, from everyone. And a time to also begin to now move forward with a new determination. With a determination to rise to the challenge and what Yahuwah is really requiring of us at this time. Because he is still very much the answer. And he's the only answer that we have to to everything that we now face and see. So the Word of God does tell us that all of creation does. It longs or yearns for the manifestation of the sons of God. This is very much what Yahuwah is actually trying to do at this time, now bringing his sons and daughters to their place. The kingdom of darkness, in resisting this, seems to forget that before this was really being brought to the fore, the whole earth was really violently raging. And part of the reason it was raging was that a number of the actual things he was actually trying to do in the earth to actually address these issues were being exacerbated or challenged or removed by this kingdom in their relentless pursuit to pursue vanity, lucre, and just all the base things that ultimately don't bring eternal salvation, but they rather bring a judgment and damnation to their own souls. And because many of these things weren't being addressed, because this kingdom was too busy removing them for greed and for their own profit, is the reason the earth was being pushed really into this existential type of crisis. I've done in previous videos, I've actually shown you that the earth is, I wouldn't say on a mission, but she is actually operating an agenda against sin, essentially, and against a number of things that mankind is actually doing within the earth. This is documented in the Word of God. We have to look to understand that the earth, well, mourns very, very much for many of the things that are actually done within her. The earth isn't an inanimate, dead object, as many may think. I could only, the nearest I can think to actually explain her clearly is to say she's a sentient ecosystem. And there are certain, if I was speaking in secular language, I'd say possibly certain frequencies or things that she's needing to see or to hear or to feel in order to be in balance. And these are the things that Yahuwah is actually trying to actually build into the earth when he actually sends his sons and daughters into the earth with various gifts. And these are things that kingdom of darkness, maybe they think they can do them better, but they can't because they don't know what they are. are actually seizing upon, are actually exacerbating even environmental crisis. And then they're trying to gloss over it by calling it climate change. Now, the Word of God does actually say there is actually a community or an entity in the earth who have a mission to destroy the earth as well. So there's also that agenda also ongoing also. But Yahuwah has already pronounced judgment on the heads of people who do that. And ultimately, the judgment is ready for a foregone conclusion and is already in the book, which is the reason why they are left in many cases, because many think that they don't see any judgment or consequence, so therefore they got away with it. But usually it's actually a very extremely bad sign when you do something and there's no immediate repercussion of judgment. Because what it normally means is that your goose is cooked, essentially, is that Yahuwah is actually, he's concluded your case and there's not really a hope, is normally what that means when there's absolute silence and no repercussion or judgment. Because Israel, you'll notice, whenever Israel does do something that's not pleasing, her judgments do usually come quite swiftly or quite quickly for that reason. Because her judgment isn't a foregone conclusion and removal isn't her portion. So, as I say repeatedly, this is a time when Yahuwah is drawing nearer to the earth. Actually, heaven is actually coming nearer to the earth. That's actually one of the actual aspects of this shift. And it's one of the reasons we're going to see, well, changes in a number of things, really, increasing over the coming months. And so we would all be in a better demeanor and state to align, really, with the program of what Yahuwah is actually doing at this time, and to resist or to fight against it, because, of course, there's none has ever resisted or fought against God and ever yet prevailed. So all I would like to say is that, well, you just make a thorough denunciation of those who think that this agenda of trying to steal the identity of another person and then turn around and destroy that person is a viable enterprise. Yahuwah will certainly recompense. And yes, that's a foregone conclusion. So as I say, I'm coming into my full place and identity to right now take my place and move these things forward. I have many plans and things I want to bring forward, and are being hampered and hindered to some extent if I now have to make an investment in my technology. So if there are others who would like to contribute to my doing that, then please do feel free to donate. That will be appreciated. And we'll be coming more increasingly on to do videos really to align, well, where we go forward and the way forward and what we do go next. We have various missions, of course, through the new Global Virtual Nation of Israel channel of content we've also recently begun, as well as Israel Diaspora Report as well, a raft of content also to come out in that as well. And concluding our MAGA series to really very much conclude the previous era historically also, and to begin to now to model our way forward as a people. And this is something I'll come on increasingly to talk about as well, as there are some very important questions we now need to face, and also in light of the fact that Yahuwah is now returning to recover and deliver and redeem his people as well. So one of the actual aspects I will come increasingly to talk about is the whole issue of our nationhood, and also being moved to talk very, very much specifically about our land Israel, which we now see is currently undergoing a lot of turmoil. She always has done throughout her long history. So anyway, so I'm going to sign off on this video for now, and I may come on with other prophetic flows and words. There is a lot I do actually want to say, and I will come on as well with other content and videos to do that over the coming moments and days. So God is in process of doing great and awesome things. The God we read of in the Old Testament is still in the miracle working, wonder working business, and is now breaking through in our current day in order to prove himself mighty and strong. And to bring about an order of things we've not seen in the earth before. So what Yahuwah is actually doing now is very unique. It's very, very different. But it's something that is very, very needed at this time. If it's not put into place, there will be existential issues, essentially. And this, what Yahuwah is now doing, he's doing through his sons and through his daughters. So the kingdom of darkness themselves will find, in fighting many of these things, they're actually putting a knife to their own throat in many places. Think of it in terms of, for instance, when Yahuwah sent Joseph into Egypt. Had Joseph not gone into Egypt, even his own family would have starved to death in the famine. And the world at that time wouldn't have been saved. So we're at a similar point comparable to that. There is a resonance, there is something actually within the chosen and within the people of God that God is rising up at this time that the earth actually existentially needs in order to pass successfully into the new era and into the future. And if these things are resisted, and if those in the kingdom of darkness continue to play games, and continue even to infiltrate and exfiltrate, even the families, even family members are also being swept up and to target Yahuwah's people at this time. If these things continue and are not removed, then they need to know that the repercussions for themselves could be existential. So, not threatening anyone, I'm stating a fact. And if that kingdom cares to review my previous prophetic word and things that I've said, they'll understand that I've never been mistaken or wrong when I've said these things. So I would encourage them to think and to be mindful of what they do, really, at this time. So that's all I'll say at the moment for this video. So remember, Israel, that in Yahuwah shall all the seed of Israel be justified and shall glory. To God be the glory. We are the repairers of the breach, as per Isaiah 58:12. Hashtag will restore his paths. And this is Anne Samuels signing off for Repairers of the Breach. Bye for now.